All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going deep on something that should be, I think, pretty high on the priority list for anyone who's serious about, well, business security these days, and that is Deepfakes. I mean, you're here with us because you get it right. You want to stay ahead of the curve, understand those big developments that are going to change how we all operate, and frankly, the stuff that's happening with deepfake technology, it's moving fast. We need to unpack this.
Couldn't agree more. What's really kind of blown me away is how quickly we've gone from, deepfakes being this sci-fi concept to them being a legitimate everyday business risk. Like, think back just a few years, creating a deepfake, even a halfway decent one, took serious expertise, tons of computing power. It was a whole thing.
Yeah, it was like a Hollywood production almost.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, Dr. Maya Krishnan put it perfectly, and I think this is worth repeating. She said, what previously required specialized knowledge and significant computing power can now be accomplished with a smartphone app and a few minutes of sample audio. Let that sink in for a second. A smartphone app. That's where we are now. And that level of accessibility, it's a game changer. It's completely reshaped the threat landscape.
No question. And the data really backs that up. This isn't some theoretical future problem, This is hitting businesses now, today.
Oh, absolutely. And the numbers are shocking, frankly. I mean, VMware's 2023 report, they found a 66% increase in deepfake-related fraud. 66%. And that's just targeting financial institutions. Then you've got the FBI's IC3 data, which showed, get this, over 4,000 complaints about voice cloning fraud. In 2023 alone, that's over $40 million in losses.
But it's not just the financial hit, right? I mean, there's a broader impact here. Deloitte found that something like 78% of C-suite execs, they see deepfakes as a significant, very significant threat to their company's reputation.
Right, and those stats, I think, they really highlight how widespread this problem is becoming. It's not just about losing money. It's about trust, it's about reputation, and it's forcing companies to really rethink how they protect themselves on all these different levels.
Totally. Okay, so we've got the numbers, right? We see the big picture, but I think it's helpful to move beyond the stats and actually look at some real-world examples to really drive home how serious this is. Because these aren't just risks in theory, these are actual attacks that are happening to companies. Yeah, absolutely. And looking at those cases, what strikes me is, the level of sophistication and the sheer variety of ways that these attacks can play out.
So take, for example, that CEO voice scam. This was back in March 2023. A Canadian manufacturing firm got hit, and they ended up losing, are you ready for this, $620,000. The finance director, he gets this call, sounds exactly like their CEO, panicky, urgent, saying they need to wire money immediately for this time-sensitive acquisition.
And what's so interesting there, right, is how the attackers created that sense of authenticity. It wasn't just a generic voice clone. They actually captured the CEO's specific speech patterns, his tone. It really sounded like him.
And it wasn't just the voice, right? They reference internal company details, which made it even more believable. Plus, they play that classic urgency card, we need this done now, no time to waste. Bypass all those normal protocols. And get this, the source material they used for that voice clone, apparently, it was recordings from earnings calls, conference presentations, stuff that's publicly available.
Yeah.
They took public info and weaponized it.
Yeah, and that's a big takeaway here. When you zoom out, you see how even those, seemingly harmless digital footprints that we leave, those can be collected, analyzed, and used against us in these incredibly sophisticated attacks. Even just doing your regular public speaking, that can become the source material for a very convincing deepfake.
Then you've got the case out of Chicago. Multinational corporation targeted by a fake HR director. Except this wasn't just a voice. This was like full-on video calls. Can you even imagine?
This one really gets to the heart of how much we trust, visual confirmation. And the fact that this went on for weeks, it tells you something about how vulnerable we are when we just rely on seeing someone on a screen as proof of their identity.
And the damage was serious. They were collecting sensitive personal information, even convincing candidates to put down, training program deposits. Weeks. They were pulling this off for weeks. It's a complete breach of security, not to mention a huge violation of trust.
Yeah, the fact that they were able to sustain that deception for so long, it's pretty disturbing. Suggests a high level of planning, a deep understanding of how HR processes work, how to exploit those systems.
And then there's a stock price manipulation case. Early 2024, deepfake videos start popping up. CEO of a publicly traded tech company. announcing all sorts of bad news, right? Missed earnings, regulatory problems, you name it.
And of course, the timing of those videos, it was no coincidence. Releasing them just before trading hours, that was calculated to have maximum impact, to drive the stock price down as soon as the market opened.
And unfortunately, it worked. Their stock plummeted 8% before they could even issue a statement. Set the record straight. Huge financial hit. And of course, the people behind the scam, probably short sellers, they made a killing. James Watkins, he said something really interesting about this. He said these attacks, they're succeeding even against organizations that, on paper, have strong security measures in place. So it makes you wonder where the real weaknesses are.
No kidding. It shows that even if you're well-resourced, even if you're security conscious, you're still vulnerable to these new forms of manipulation.
So let's peel back the layers here a bit. What is the technology that makes these deepfakes so believable? Let's get into the nuts and bolts.
Okay, so at the core of all of this, right, we've got some seriously advanced artificial intelligence. And two technologies, they really stand out. Generative adversarial networks, or GANs for short, and transformer-based models.
Okay, so GNNs. Let's break that down a bit.
Yeah.
I always picture it like, it's almost like an AI competition, right? You've got one AI that's trying to create a fake, and then another one that's acting like a detective trying to spot the fake.
Yeah.
And they're constantly learning from each other, getting better.
That's a great analogy, actually. Think of it like a forger and a detective, right?
Yeah.
The forger's trying to make a perfect counterfeit, the detective's trying to find the flaw, and that back and forth, that's what allows the fake, the deepfake, to become more and more realistic. The generator AI, it gets feedback from the discriminator AI, and it just keeps refining its output, getting closer and closer to the real thing.
And then you've got these transformer-based models. We hear a lot about those in the chatbot world, right?
Right.
How do they factor into deepfakes?
These are models that are amazing at understanding and generating sequences. Could be text, audio, even video. So they can be trained on huge data sets, learn the nuances of someone's voice, how they speak, their facial expressions, and then bam, they can reproduce those things incredibly accurately. It's all about attention, where the AI is focusing on the most important parts of the input to create something coherent, something believable.
This is not just one piece of tech doing all the work here, right?
Wow.
It's this combination, especially in the really sophisticated attacks.
Exactly. You might have voice cloning, which, these days can be done with as little as 30 seconds of audio combined with facial mapping, animation pulled from photos, videos. Then you layer on natural language processing, so the speech sounds, natural, appropriate to the context. It's like a multi-pronged technical assault.
And Dr. Sarah Nolan, she brought up something pretty chilling about it. This contextual awareness, right? It's not just mimicking a voice or a face. These deepfakes can now pull in info from public sources, LinkedIn profiles, company announcements, social media. So now they're referencing real projects, real colleagues, using internal jargon. It takes the impersonation to a whole other level.
Absolutely. Being able to weave in those details, that's what makes it so much more convincing. It's not just mimicry anymore. It's like creating a whole synthetic identity that fits perfectly within a specific business context. Way harder to detect.
So for businesses, here in North America, let's talk brass tacks. What's the real impact of all this? We touched on some of it with the examples, but let's break it down. Where are businesses really feeling the pain?
The impact, it's serious. It hits in several key areas. First, there's direct financial fraud. As we've seen, deepfakes can be used to authorize transactions, and those businesses that rely heavily on verbal confirmation, those are especially vulnerable. The average loss from a voice-based CEO scam in 2023, we talked about it earlier, it was over $300,000. And it's not just that there are more attempts. It's that the deepfakes are actually good enough now to bypass the security measures that are in place.
Right.
That's a sign that our current authentication systems, they're not cutting it.
Wow, $300,000. That's a massive hit. And then there's the damage to reputation. If you have a deepfake of a CEO saying something damaging, something embarrassing, that can stick around, right? Even after it's debunked, it can erode public trust, hurt the brand.
Yeah, reputational damage, it's a particularly nasty threat when it comes to deepfakes. It's not like traditional crises, These incidents can explode really quickly, and they involve a level of technical complexity that makes it really, really hard to respond effectively and quickly. It's no wonder that the Canadian Chamber of Commerce found that 62% of businesses see leadership deepfakes as having a severe, potentially extremely severe impact on reputation.
And for companies that are publicly traded, well, we saw what happened with that stock price manipulation. That 8% drop, that was real money. And even after the deepfake is exposed as fake, the impact can linger. If investors lose confidence, that has a ripple effect. Does this make people more cautious about trusting market information in general, do you think?
I think that's a very real possibility. The speed at which this stuff can spread, misinformation fueled by deepfakes, it's a huge systemic risk. It can definitely erode confidence in the markets over time.
And it's not just the direct fraud and reputational damage, there's also operational disruption. I mean, security teams are scrambling to implement new protocols, more verification. Executives are under more scrutiny. Decision-making slows down because everyone's triple-checking everything. It's like this constant burden of verification, this trust tax, as Michael Chen put it.
Trust tax, that's a great way to put it. It's the hidden cost of operating in a world where it's getting harder and harder to distinguish between what's real and what's synthetic. It forces you to invest more and more in verification, and that slows everything down.
Makes sense. Okay, so the threats are real, they're serious. What can companies actually do to protect themselves? What's the playbook here?
The key is a multi-layered approach. There's no silver bullet. It takes a combination of advanced tech, changes to processes, educating employees, and being prepared legally.
So let's start with the tech. What kind of detection technologies are out there? What's being developed?
There are a few promising things on the horizon. Liveness detection, for example. These systems can analyze video, look for those subtle cues, those tiny movements, changes in lighting, skin texture, to figure out if the person on the video call is actually physically there, that they're real. Then there's audio watermarking. This is about embedding digital signatures into audio so you can verify that it hasn't been tampered with. And then you've got multimodal analysis, which is getting more sophisticated all the time. These tools analyze the audio and the visual streams together, looking for inconsistencies that you might not catch if you're just looking at one or the other. Like maybe the synthesized voice sounds okay on its own, but the lip movements don't quite match up.
And it's good to see that some of the big players, Microsoft, Google, even innovative AI companies like Sanctuary AI up in Canada, they're all working on these detection systems. And some of the reported accuracy rates, they're getting pretty high, over 90% for some types of deepfakes. That sounds promising, but what about that other 10%? Are those the more sophisticated attacks? And what does it mean if there's still a 1 in 10 chance of failure?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of the challenge. Yeah, 90% accuracy is great, but that remaining 10%, those are often the most advanced, the most targeted deepfakes, the ones that pose the biggest risk. And when you're talking about a high-stakes scenario, like a major financial transaction, even a small chance of failure can have huge consequences. That's why it's so important to have a multi-layered defense. You can't just rely on detection alone.
Totally. So technology is part of the solution, but we need to adapt our processes too. What kind of changes can companies make on that front?
Some really simple changes can make a big difference. Multi-factor authentication, that's a must for any high-risk transaction. Don't just rely on a voice or a video. Get another layer of confirmation. Challenge questions that use personal knowledge, things that aren't publicly available that can be really effective. Out-of-band verification, where you confirm something through a separate channel, like, you get a wire transfer request, you call the person back on a known number to verify. And then for unusual transactions, just delaying the transaction, that can give you time to properly check things out. Rita Sampson, she always says, the best protection comes from combining those human-centered processes with the technology. It's not one or the other, it's both.
That makes a lot of sense. You can have the best tech in the world, but if your employees aren't following the right procedures, it might not be enough. So that brings us to training.
Employee education, it's absolutely critical. You need to teach people how to spot the red flags, the warning signs of a deepfake attack. Things like unusual urgency, inconsistencies in communication style, requests that just seem off. Encourage people to think critically, to question anything that doesn't feel right, especially when it comes to money or sensitive data, and give them clear ways to report those suspicious interactions. Regular simulations, testing, those can be really helpful too. Put people through scenarios so they know what to do if it happens for real. The Ponemon Institute, they found that organizations that do comprehensive training, they saw a 64% reduction in successful social engineering attacks. That's huge. Training is great, but how do you make sure people stay vigilant over time? I mean, we're all bombarded with so much information these days. It's easy to let things slip.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It can't just be a one-time training session, right? You need refreshers, you need to use real-world examples, and you need to create a culture where people feel comfortable speaking up if something seems off. They shouldn't be afraid to question things. Regular reminders, internal communication campaigns, those can help keep security top of mind.
Exactly. You're trying to build a human firewall, right? Something that works alongside the technology.
And then there's the legal and regulatory side of things.
Yeah.
Companies need to be thinking about this proactively.
Absolutely. You need a legal strategy. That means having clear incident response protocols specifically for deepfake attacks. It means having relationships with digital forensics experts, people who can help you authenticate content, track down where a deepfake came from, and you need to have communication templates ready to go so you can respond quickly and accurately if something happens. And of course, you need to stay on top of the laws, the regulations, because they're changing all the time.
Speaking of, what about the current landscape in the US and Canada? It feels like the law is always playing catch up with technology.
It's definitely a common pattern, and deepfakes are no exception. In the US, there's been some action at the state level focusing on things like, non-consensual pornography, election interference. At the federal level, there's the IOGAN Act, which is more about supporting research into detection. In Canada, it's been more about using existing privacy and cybersecurity frameworks, but there's this new Consumer Privacy Protection Act, the CPPA. That could mean stronger penalties for privacy violations, which could cover deepfakes too. Emma Richardson, she's made the point that we're probably heading towards mandatory disclosure of AI-generated content, but the specific standards, how you verify that something's real, that's still being worked out.
So, looking ahead, what's next? What kind of deepfake threats are on the horizon? What do companies need to be prepared for?
Well, the bad news is the attacks are only going to get more sophisticated, more varied. We're probably going to see more multimodal deepfakes, things that combine realistic voice, video, text, all working together in these very targeted attacks. The potential for personalized impersonation, that's a big one, using all the data that's out there online to create these hyper-realistic fakes. Real-time deepfakes, that's another scary thought. Imagine live impersonation during a video conference or even on a phone call. And then, of course, there are adversarial attacks, things specifically designed to evade the detection methods we're using. Dr. Krishnan, she said it well. Detection is always going to be playing catch-up to some extent.
Sounds like a constant arms race. But, it's not all doom and gloom, right? There must be some positive applications for this tech.
Oh, definitely. The AI that powers deepfakes, it has a lot of potential. Things like content localization, dubbing someone into another language while preserving their appearance, their mannerisms, accessibility enhancements for people with disabilities, preserving historical figures, recreating them digitally for educational purposes. And then there's all the creative and entertainment possibilities, as long as it's done ethically, with transparency and consent.
So for you, the listener, the business leader who's trying to stay ahead of all this, what are some concrete things you can do right now to protect yourself, to protect your company?
I would say start by doing a deepfake vulnerability assessment. Figure out where your organization is most exposed, what your weakest points are, then put in place a clear escalation protocol for any communication that seems suspicious, especially if it involves money or sensitive information. Look at the detection tools that are out there, figure out which ones are right for you, and integrate them into your systems. Have an incident response plan. If a deepfake attack happens, what are you going to do? Have those steps laid out, from the technical side to communication to legal. Training. Make sure your employees know what to look for, how to report things, especially those in finance, HR, executive support. Set a clear standard for how you authenticate digital communications, especially those coming from leadership. And finally, don't stop learning. Keep up with the technology, the threats, the best practices.
So it's about being proactive, having multiple layers of defense, and building a culture of vigilance. And I think the bigger picture here is that we're moving into a world where verification, authenticating information, it's not optional anymore. It's essential. It changes how we think about trust in the digital world. Elizabeth Murray, she said it well. Verification is becoming a fundamental requirement.
Absolutely. And some of the new technologies that are being explored, things like blockchain-based content provenance, digital signatures, those could be game changers. They're about proving that something's real, not just detecting fakes. It's a whole different way of thinking about digital trust.
So the takeaway here is clear. Deepfakes, they're not some far-off threat. They're here, they're evolving fast, and they require a comprehensive response from all businesses. In a world where what we see and hear can be so easily manipulated, building that foundation of trust, that's critical, not just for survival, but for success.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And on that note, here's something to think about. As the lines between what's real and what's fake continue to blur, and the tech gets better and better, what fundamental changes are we going to need to make? How are we going to verify things? What are we going to believe? Those are questions for all of us, not just businesses, but individuals too. It's something we all need to be thinking about as we move forward. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.